C'est bonjour, Denny Maganaduk, Miigwech Kabijaik. Welcome you here this morning. We're here to discuss a call on the federal government to urgently address funding shortfalls for Jordan's principals within the Interlake Reserve Tribal Council communities. As you all know, Jordan's principle is to support communities in accessing essential services for First Nations children and their families. And this promised support has been slow and incomplete to get to the communities. So I'm going to introduce you to Carl Zednick, the Interlake Reserves Tribal Council, to give us our opening prayer and opening remarks.
Welcome, everyone. I just want to thank you all for joining us today, the media, all the different presses, and of course the chiefs here from the Interlake region, and Jim and Melanie for helping today. I want to highlight the Jordan's Principle program. So first, in introduction, Jordan River Anderson was a child in care who had died under the care of the government, and the government meaning both provincial and federal jurisdictions that couldn't decide on whose jurisdiction Jordan River Anderson was, and because of that lack of attention and of course lack of care, fiduciary care and obligation, he as a result passed away because of the lack of care provided by the healthcare system. Similar to this, we're facing a similar approach from the federal government with lack of care, lack of policy, lack of guidelines to run this program effectively. They have not created any of that for us to highlight and to utilize to run an efficient program. We've taken it on ourselves to build an efficient program, and we've created our own policies, but we can't implement them because the federal government doesn't have their own policy on this program. So due to that, we want to highlight that this has created a strained relationship with us. It's been difficulty to administer it because we have no policies from the federal government to guide us. However, we've created our own, again, but because they haven't implemented theirs, well, how can you implement yours? The past 8 years, IRTC has been held financially accountable. We passed all our 8 years of audits with unqualified opinion, and I take great pride in that as a CEO. We have proven ourselves to work with others. I have a commerce degree in business. I know what I'm doing in business. And this financial accountability I hold with great honor to hold that every dollar we have is spent fiscally responsible. So now it's time for this Indigenous Services Canada to be held accountable for the things and the good faith that they pretend in these offices and share that they're going to spend and share with us. Well, today it's a result of bad faith for us. So to that notion, I just want to highlight the government's and its failure in meeting our fiduciary needs and also failing their own fiduciary duty and obligation and attending to First Nation jurisdiction. Chimagwich.
Thank you, Carl. So we have the Interlake Chiefs here. I want to turn the mic over to the Grand Chief of IRTC, Cornell McLean, to give us some opening remarks as well.
Good morning. I'm Chief Cornell McLean of Lake Manitoba First Nation. I'm the chairman of the Interlake Reserves Tribal Council. I just wanted to bring this forward that it was a program of dependency that was created by the federal government and pushed upon us to our people. With their Back to Basics, Jordan's Principle program was wide open with no policy, no policies that were given to any First Nation. A lot of us depended on those dollars to take care of our members, on and off reserve, with the promise of being reimbursed for whatever dollar we spent, dollar for dollar. And now we can't find a culprit that made those promises. Is nowhere to be found from Health Canada. We did bring this forward with a meeting with Jennifer Wheatley, the ADM for Health Canada, and I basically told her that we want a decision maker. We don't want somebody to just take a message back to her minister, and which was basically that you created a program for our people to fail. And then failure is exactly what's happening here today. IRTC is out about $1 million of reimbursements, and we were told that we would be able to meet with Health Canada to resolve that issue. That's monies that we've taken out of other programs to meet the demand, meet the needs of our people, you know, for food, Pampers, wipes, pay rent for them, and provide respite, because the Jordan's Principle program, you know, you're giving back to basic, you're giving basic needs, you know, all of these programs. And what ends up happening right now today is that all the chiefs, the leadership is all over Facebook because we spent all the money. Well, that's not the case, as you heard from the CEO, that, you know, we had a review done by the senior officials from Ottawa. We came out of that with flying colors. We showed them all our reports, all of our spending, and, you know, and we just wanted to make sure that we were going to get the New Year's funding, which was this year. And we have funding letter agreements, commitments from the government, and my reasoning to them was, are you gonna hold your obligation to pay those to the Interlake Reserves Tribal Council? You know, because we have over 1,500, 2,000 members, families that we take care of week in, week out, and we can't even, you know, provide any POs for food, POs for, you know, anything, winter clothing. Some kids are going without. You know, all we're asking for the federal government and Health Canada here in Manitoba is to, hey, follow the tribunal decision. There was a tribunal decision that was, you have to reimburse in a timely fashion, and then after that decision came out, well, lo and behold, everything was cut off. It wasn't us that created that debt for Health Canada, that 551 million that they speak about. It was that little man at the office here on St. Mary's that, you know, approved everything, and then all of a sudden you can't find the guy. So, you know, we're not trying to lay blame on anybody. We're just trying to hold them accountable. They have an obligation to the Jordan's Principle Tribunal decision to pay, and I think it's unfair that they're using this decision because we didn't agree with the long-term reform. I think that needs to be addressed, and our kids are suffering because of that leveraging by the minister, who wouldn't even meet with us in Ottawa. Miigwech.
Thank you, Cornell. I'm going to ask each and every one of the chiefs to say a few words. I'll ask Chief Lawrence Latander from Dauphin River First Nation to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. After the meetings in Ottawa this past week, First Nations leadership in Manitoba is horrified by the information shared of impending changes to the Jordan's Principle funding. Jordan's Principle funding was structured as a back-to-basic approach. A child has a need, and through Jordan's Principle funding, the nation ensures that need is met. This government has now abruptly and last minute flipped the script and put all the pressure and onus on leadership in communities and to begin making massive cuts to children. First Nations should not have to beg for information concerning upcoming funding for children in need in their communities, nor should First Nations have to go without support to their children. This was not the Christmas gift we want for our children. Let me remind Trudeau and his ministers that Jordan's Principle was established after the short and painful life of Jordan River Anderson, a young boy from Manitoba who died due to the disorganizations of governments. We note that $12 billion has gone to the support of Ukraine. However, Jordan's Principle only received $3.5 billion. I note that First Nations stand with Ukraine and we wish to help them when we can. However, when our First Nations children here in Canada are denied funding that has been promised, we cannot idly sit by. We are aware of the looming federal election and would be beyond disappointed in Trudeau and his ministers if this is how they choose to treat First Nations children, communities, and First Nations leaderships. We demand that the funding change be reversed and to instead invest in care and love for the children of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to call on Chief Tony Travers, Kinoshchigon First Nation. Say a few words.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Chief Tony Travers, Kinojistigan First Nation. I'm speaking on behalf of my membership in regards to the Jordan's Principal funding that has been cut from our tribal council. A lot of our First Nation membership depend on that for respite, monthly food allowances, and now they're coming to our First Nation, well, to look for those services. So we are currently providing those services that have been cut from our tribal council's programs. So as I said, we are looking forward to the government upholding the tribunal's decision to fund those programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to ask Acting Chief Brad Beardy, Lake St. Martin First Nation.
This is Brad Beardy, our acting chief from Ubasquediang First Nation. And I hear the frustrations of the leaderships up here. And we did meet with Rod Graham here in November, and we asked him to give us some information on this. He hasn't gotten back to us at all. And I know that the program that we use, that it's Christmas time and they come and do this. Let's go back a little bit to we were evacuated for a number of years from our community of Lake St. Martin, and at the time we were Red Cross was involved at that time, and then they came to us at the time that Stephen Traynor was RDG regional director, and then we met with him. He came with a piece with a letter. Give these to your give these to your people. That letter was to cut them off from Red Cross for the rent being paid, and we weren't prepared to do that. And it's happening here again. They're kind of blindsiding us here. They went back on their word, and it's frustrating. We do use this program in the community, as Chief Travers said, that come Christmas time and we need this, and then they did tell us at the time we were there, if we go over our spending, that we could go back and ask for additional funding. And then so far, yet, like I mentioned earlier, that was in November. We met with them, and they haven't come back to us at all with any answers. I'll leave that.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to call on Councillor Daryl Shorting, Little Saskatchewan First Nation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here today and to show support to our neighboring communities in the Interlake Reserves Tribal Council. I'd like to start off by saying there was no outline, no policy, an open book with no guidelines. And we know that the federal government, and we showed and expressed our concerns in that area from Little Saskatchewan to the government. And it was just like, go ahead, keep going, keep spending, keep helping. And I did mention that to our chief and our councillors from the Little Saskatchewan First Nation. I'm scared that what they're telling us is going to come crashing down one day or another. With no guidelines, open book policy. It's very, very fearful when you're a First Nation person in this country called Canada. Since 2016, there's $3.5 billion allocated to the First Nations youth, children, elders, and families to support one another for our people. And here now the funding is being cut. And it saddens me to hear that triple the amount has gone to a war that has nothing to do with us, First Nation people. That proofs to show me and tell me that that funding is allocated for the well-being of people on the other side of the world. And how does that make me feel, an indigenous person here? We say all lives matter. Well, let's prove it. Let's prove it that all of our children matter. And you know, reconciliation is the means of friendly relations by both parties. It can't be just one-sided. Now, we did our part. We followed through with the rules. Our audits show that. But you know, it saddens me as a leader when I'm receiving phone calls from my First Nation band members and telling me, well, why are you telling us no when an individual at Health Canada told us, yes, go ahead, you can buy 2, 3, 4 four-wheelers. I didn't have a problem with buying four-wheelers for our youth. The problem I had is you buy for every child, every family for that four-wheeler. That's why I'm saying the guidelines were not followed. We're not clear with the guidelines that were given. To me, why would I give a child a four-wheeler that could harm and hurt that child? So you see, there's things like that. I'm using that as an example just to let you know, the media, the people out there that are listening, the funders, the guidelines were not followed through with. And that's where I sit. My problem is with the guidelines that were not followed through with on that end. Friendly relations, we try to be friendly all the time. But enough being friendly. If things aren't listened to on our end here, I will shut down number 6 highway. I'll start from there and I'll leave it there. I hope this doesn't fall on deaf ears again, because it's getting repetitive with these meetings time and time again. We need the help to help our people. And the most fearful thing I have is going for our First Nations here to go to MNP, BDO, and all the other people that are there to show a good working, to work with our First Nation, but they're not there for us, for our well-being. We have to take money from other programs to support our families. We need to pay back those other programs. If we don't do that, we have a risk of going into third party. Those are my comments today. I thank you for giving me the time to express my concerns. Thank you. From Little Saskatchewan First Nation.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to ask Chief Stan Bird, Peguis First Nation.
Yeah, Mino Bizu Gino Indigenous Cause, Mikaze do them. Good morning, everyone. I'm here this morning to show support to our neighboring communities, to speak specifically on Jordan's Principle and Canada's continued systematic discrimination towards our children, specifically Canada's laws and their failure to follow their own laws, to uphold their own laws. Just to give you some background information, on December 12, 2007, Jordan's Principle was passed in the House of Commons. In 2016, there was a CHRT ruling that found the Government of Canada responsible for discrimination against First Nation children and families under the First Nation Child and Family Services Program. Under the continued work towards child welfare reform, Jordan's Principle was set out as law. As part of the solution to the discrimination and overrepresentation of First Nation children in CFS care, which was primarily due to poverty. The CHRT rulings and Canada's non-compliance started in 2016, where the CHRT, on a ruling of May 10, 2016, Canada was to implement the full meaning of Jordan's Principle, where Jordan's Principle was not only for the First Nation children with disabilities. Under the ruling, the Canadian government was ordered to stop all discrimination towards First Nation children, First Nations Child and Family Services, and Jordan's Principle. Canada was found in breach of Canadian human rights, our human rights. Although there were these rulings and others that followed, the Government of Canada continues to violate the basic human rights of First Nations children and families under Jordan's Principle. Since the rulings of 2016 and up to 2021, Canada spent close to $700 million fighting First Nations children from accessing supports and services they need. Under the 2020 CHRT ruling, it states that Jordan's Principle is not a fixed budget, it is a legal obligation. Jordan's Principle is law. Canada must stop the discrimination of funding for Jordan's Principle within the communities. Funding in my community has been completely discontinued, and it places our children at immediate risk for urgent requests. Canada continues to racially discriminate First Nations children where even today they are not complying with the CHRT timelines of 24 hours for urgent requests and 48 hours for non-urgent requests. Families continue to wait on these requests, and they often go unanswered and are now being referred to national. On November 21st, 2024, Canada was yet again found to be in failure of complying with CHRT rulings of Jordan's Principle. And this impacts many children from obtaining the necessary and urgently required services and products they are eligible to receive under Jordan's Principle. Canada was given another deadline of December 10, 2024 to address the backlogs of Jordan Principle requests. Most requests from my community dating back as far as 2022 and that are marked urgent go unanswered. They have not been addressed. Our families continue to wait for a response. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And we're going to go to Chief Curvis Anderson, Penemutang First Nation.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, actually. Sorry. Thank Carl for the opening prayer, and I also want to thank that we have a couple of elders here in the room supporting the chiefs here and their families, sitting here for our families, our children. I want to recognize them. I speak for Penemutang First Nation and our health program. Our health program in Penemutang has our health center has the accreditation of exemplary status, the highest level of accreditation you can achieve in an operation. So just to speak, we're going to bring this up because of integrity and accountability when it comes to programs. We have a very high standard in our health center. Our health center, our health director that's been calling on these very things that the chiefs are calling on. Where's the guidance? Where's the criteria? We're going to run into trouble here. Everybody's been saying it. The directors, our experts, I call them. I've been calling out for help, a concern. For Penemutang, I question the relationship. Is it a mutual, respectful relationship? Because when we're called upon to help government meet compliance in rulings, tribunal rulings, we've always stepped up for government and helped them to assist them in meeting those rulings that they're obligated to meet. We've always stepped up to assist them. And our health center continues to take that path, even without direction on this program. Right, our staff have been at it, trying to create some kind of policy, some sort of criteria that would help the families and sustain this program. Under no direction of government, our health center and our community has taken that upon themselves. Just looking ahead, we could see trouble coming. And today, because of lack of criteria, I question today the sudden drop-off here we're facing today. Are our families and children today better off than they were before the program? Because of a lack of criteria, their families have become very dependent on the program. There was no program to raise those expectations like that before. So our families are really struggling today. The worst of all, the time of year leading up to Christmas. What does a family do? Do you buy gifts or do you buy food? Because the program you've been dependent on is not providing anymore. So again, as other chiefs, Chief McLean said, we're having to rely on our own source revenue to step in for a program that's funded, a program that's been ruled, and a program that's law and legal. We're having to use our own source revenue now to make sure those families have food on the table by providing those gifts at Christmas time. You know, that was, in today's world, you'd expect those kind of rulings have some weight to them. Apparently right now I feel like it's not the case. Our families once again are going without. You know, for Penamotang, we had the go-ahead that you've heard from other chiefs, from the regional staff coordinator in a meeting in April. I had 2 proposals coming for Penamotang, and I was cut off mid-sentence, having it stamped, yes, approved. So are you relying on the relationship that Penamotang has with government, mutually working together with what I expected to be a mutual, respectful relationship. We acted on those promises, those verbal promises, because the guy, what are you supposed to expect when a guy's stamping your approval mid-sentence? And now because of the drawback, the clawbacks, we're carrying that program now. This is so many times we're carrying that program. We're carrying prevention. We're carrying Jordan's principle out of our own source revenue, our own dollars. And this is something that the rulings were supposed to address, that we don't have to rely on our own source revenue they're supposed to provide. But here we are, full circle, supporting a program that's been ruled on, or a program that has a tribunal ruling on it. But we continue to provide for it. So I just want to finish off here with, again, who is left to explain? You know, when something goes wrong in First Nations, it's always the chief and council that face a retribution of what happened, what did you do? We didn't do anything here. I can stand with the chiefs and the council. We didn't do anything. We provided the families with no guidance, no criteria, no policy on what shouldn't go. It was upon the government to provide that. When they provide contribution agreements, and they have a mechanism for that. They can pretend they have to create it, that they don't have it. Every dollar that comes to the First Nations comes with a contribution agreement which has guidelines on how to spend it. Why couldn't that be the case here? Too much work? Or are we being set up? So with that, I want to finish off with that and finish off that it is the government that should be held to account for what's going on here. And it's shameful to do this at our children, and a child's most important part of the year, the time of year they look forward to at Christmas time, and not to do this just before Christmas. I call that shameful. And everybody says that they carry on, that every child matters, they fully support that. I don't see any support today for every child matters on behalf of the government. This is the time of year, again, Christmas is what children look forward to. And all their families are up in the air, and we're having to step in, and we are. Penamotang's own source revenue will provide for those children to make sure they all get a gift. But I will leave it at that. That shouldn't be the case. Government should be providing here, as ruled upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So at this point, we do have the media here. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
Maybe for Cornell, can you tell us what is the total amount owed to Interlake Reserve Tribal Council right now?
It's just over $1 million.
Okay, and how long does that date back to, Cornell?
Well, that's the last part of our funding for the third quarter. And I'll just say, if there was a compromise, if they were able to give us that, all the children from the Interlake communities would have a Christmas.
What communications has the federal government, like how have they explained this backlog to you? What rationale do they have for withholding this money, for allowing it to go this long in total, roughly $1 million?
Well, I guess with anything like Chief Anderson saying that, there's contribution agreements. We have a letter of commitment from the government of Canada, and we brought that forward to our meeting and told them, hey, this is what's owed to the tribal council. can we get that? So she made a commitment that her and the deputy minister would sit down with us to try and get those funds released. But, of course, with government, nothing's going to be released till January anyway, right?
For the chief from Little Saskatchewan, you mentioned a possible blockade on Highway 6. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Where would that be? Is there kind of a deadline for when you might act on this?
Well, my concerns and my wording, not to harm our northern relatives up north. But when you do drastic things like this, that's the only time I feel as a leader. I've been in leadership now over 12 years. It's, like I said, it's getting repetitive. The only time that we're being listened to is when we threaten to blockade the CN Railway, Trans-Canada Highway, and in this case, number 6 Highway. So that's drastic, very drastic measures. But I hate to do that to our neighbors or relatives in the north. But that's my feelings there. We need help. That's the same thing that happened to us in 2011 when we had a flood, a man-made flood. Our community was devastated, destroyed, ruined. Still to this day, our CSA hasn't been signed. Again, that's going on 12 years here. So you see and you hear my frustrations because I'm the one getting the phone calls from my elders. I'm the one getting the phone calls from our off-reserve band members that were purposely flooded out. Now they live in the urban centers that they were removed from the First Nation and placed in the urban centers. Now they become accustomed to living in the urban centers. But that's my comments, and they won't fall on deaf ears. Once I tell our people back home to blockade something, they will do it. And that's not a threat, and that's not an empty threat. We will do it. So that's where I'm at with that. Thank you.
Once again, for Chief Cornell, can you tell us how many people are affected by this backlog? Do we know the total number is 1 million? Are we talking, 100 families or more or less, or
900 families.
900 families? It's a significant funding, and this is for health services, for all sorts of different things.
All sorts of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, okay. When you hear that number, as chief, you see that amount, what kind of emotions, what feeling does that give you?
Well, I can tell you it disturbs me because it's been on my mind. Like, I just had a call today from a member that she needs her rent paid or she's going to be evicted. She has a child that's severely disabled. What am I to do? I paid the rent. That's what had to happen. Anybody, any leader, I said that, cares about their people will certainly do that. All the leaders around the table here today would do that. It's Christmas. My kids might have to go without. But, I'm just saying that when you think about your families, they have to come first. Your membership has to come first. And that's what happens with us.
And part of something that was discussed today was this idea for more policies in place, more guidelines. Can you just explain for us what does that mean exactly? Like more strict rules on how this money is distributed, or just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, the program, when it was rolled out, there was a program that was rolled out with money, but no guidelines. There was nothing straight across the board. When you ask to implement the guidelines, well, you're not adhering to the Jordan's Principle ruling, because when the program was given, it was back to basic with no policy guidelines whatsoever. Those guidelines need to be implemented in order to have a more successful program, I believe.
I can also give an example of a situation that we had faced when the regional office, requested to pay someone's car repairs in excess, right? And so they did that on their own mandate, regional office. So I just want to highlight their inadequacies on failing to sort of implement any guidelines on their own office and what they were going to fund and support. So I think in general, we've taken a good lead in ensuring that our family members have been met with urgent needs and looking at case-by-case basis. But at the end of the day, we have not looked at anything that was, in excess and inappropriate. We would never fund anything like that. So, Chief Miigwech.
For Chief Cornell, just give us more details about the audit that you said was passed with flying colors?
Well, like Carl had mentioned, IRTC, the last 8 audits were passed with flying colors. We did have an audit on the Jordan's Principle program where Health Canada and the national office came to our office here in Winnipeg. They had them look at our sheets and our transactions, and they passed. We spent every dollar where it was supposed to be spent, and nothing was abused.
And in attest to that, we have an accreditation program in our health. Our health is fully accredited by Canada. So,
And then for Chief Anderson, which programs did you have to borrow from, and how have you seen that affect those programs?
Yeah, I just had a meeting this morning with my office reserve staff. These are the ones that are short now to provide for their children in their programs. Our community has 900 plus the children in the program. Our on reserve are getting support there for their children. But our off reserve is where we're having to use our own source revenue, and it is going to come from, not from necessarily from programs. It's our own dollars is what I'm saying. Pinning with things, our own source revenue. Those are our own dollars. Those aren't what you call Indian monies. That's meant to help our community, to supplement other areas, families in need all the time of everything. So when I mentioned the needs that are highlighted here today are important needs, but they're not the only needs that are asked upon leadership to provide. We have all kinds of need from the community, and this is where that our money we're having to use from things we can be providing for other areas that are shorted all the time, just like everything else. Other communities need, even on reserve, adults. Adults need help. Need repairing homes, roads. Now we can't use that extra money for that right now, because we're providing for, once again, like I said, we're providing for a program that's been ruled upon, has a ruling to provide. And here we are using our own source revenue. I'd rather be using that to support our families and our community, because of the ruling. Because the child comes first in my community, we're willing to transfer those dollars to support this program. The shortcomings of this program is where we're stepping in.
So a lot of the families that we speak to who are trying to access Jordan's Principle talk about these departmental barriers or bureaucratic barriers where the case is sort of passed to a different department, or they're told to access it through NIHB. What needs to be done to remove these bureaucratic barriers?
So, when Chief Bird said that they're being sent to the region and then 12 hours to 24 hours response time, that ain't happening. There's more denials than anything that's happening rather than approvals, because we had a young girl from Lake Manitoba. I'll just tell you what was sent to Toronto for stem cell surgery. It was a trial, and we had sent that into the department over a week for a response. So the community just covered it because we couldn't wait. This was a trial for this young girl. We didn't want to lose her. So she went, and we got a denial back. So what does that tell you, whether the program works or not? Who's making these decisions? Because they went to the national office, and that was what we got back, a denial.
What are you hoping comes out of this press conference that you've all convened here for today?
Yeah, we're looking for a compromise, at least something from the government to say, hey, get us through Christmas, let us feed our families here. Here we are again begging for money, begging the federal government to help us feed our people. Like I said it before, we have the most poverty in Canada here in Manitoba. This is the biggest Indian reserve. We have numerous peoples to take care of. And, we have the biggest community, biggest First Nation in Manitoba, part of our tribal council. And you just heard it from him. They have no money. Well, that should give them some reason to open up that tickle trunk or whatever they got, cash box, and say, hey, we're going to help these First Nations people out. We're not begging for it. It was a ruling that was in our favor, and that we should be able to help our people with that money.
And then
Go ahead.
Councilman Daryl Shorting, Saskatchewan. The funding that we're speaking of here today, and I totally agree with what was previously said. The provincial and the federal government are always disputing who should pay. But keep in mind, we are the fiduciary duty of the federal government to look after our well-being, not the provincial system. And this is how it started in 2016 when a young boy from northern Manitoba was refused services on who's going to pay. And that's what comments were made here. I totally agree that this funding shouldn't be for four-wheelers, helmets, vehicle repairs. But it was the federal government that put that on us as leaders to help in back to basic needs. And it's again, it falls on us, the leaders. If we say no, we won't be leaders for our communities. So the federal government put us in a very, very tough position. And the funding, like I said earlier, there's no guidelines. So it goes back to their funding formula, their ways of doing business, and that shouldn't be. I mean, we're here to help our families. And to comment on Chief McLean's comments too, I too received that phone call. I have the text right now from a young mother that has nowhere to live if we don't pay her $700 rent. Are we ready? It's December. Are we going to kick out our families to bring them home, try and bring them home, try and find solutions for them? So it's very tough for us leaders, especially right now, December. How do you say no to someone that has young children with them that's going to be kicked out of their home? Thank you.
I would just like to close with this, that we're not here asking for a favor. We're asking Canada to uphold their laws. They are not being compliant with the rulings that have come down from the CHRT. So Canada has to follow their own laws. There's great expectations placed on leadership from the different communities to comply with a different piece of legislation that affect us as a people. Canada needs to follow their own laws. They can't forget why Jordan's Principle is a law. It is a law. Miigwech.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any more comments from the chiefs, councilors, acting chiefs, ED? Go ahead, Cornell.
I just want to thank you guys all for coming today, hoping that you help us get our message across to the federal government and anyone else who's listening out there, because we have a lot of families that depend on our First Nations and our tribal council for services, and we're hoping that they can have a good Christmas too. Miigwech.
All right, so with that, I thank the chiefs, acting chiefs, councilors, executive director for coming, the chairman, and I thank the media for coming and addressing this very, very important issue in relation to our children and our families. With that, I say miigwech.